Welcome back, you beauties. Thank you so much for joining what promises to be an enriching and hopefully an empowering conversation right now. For kids growing up in the spectrum, life is like being thrown into the deep end, literally, not just for the child, but for the family as well. It's life-changing to meet someone who can teach you how to swim, literally and metaphorically. I think Ra's going to love this metaphor, but it stands true. To bring perspective into this conversation is Nabila Deirdricks, who is the co-founder of a swim school catering to children with special needs, such as autism, ADHD, ADD, and Down syndrome, alongside speech and language therapist Deborah Stodel. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. I know this is your everyday gig, so thank you for kind of opening a window into your world so that we can get more tools, hopefully. And this sits on both sides, for those dealing with this when it's close to home, and those of us that have to engage with this community, because there is a community of people represented by these special needs, these labels that we love to put out there. And that's where I have to check myself, because I hate labeling. But we need to do something that requires very nuanced care in certain cases. So we've got to get over our own judgment and our own ideas and ask the experts. So that's why we brought you in, Nabila. I think a great place to start would be with your center and what prompted you to start this. There must be a purpose behind taking this kind of step.
So basically, let me start by saying I studied sports management and business science.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And with that being incorporated, we noticed that there's quite a lack of research in the market when it comes to special needs and the spectrum, various special needs.
Because it is a spectrum.
It's a spectrum. So you get an umbrella of disorders. It's not just one. And I incorporated swimming with it.
Because you love swimming, too. I mean,
yeah, and that is your one click where everything just disappears. All your problems just disappear and you feel like yourself.
It's a leveler. It is. I absolutely understand that, because it's used in so many different types of physical therapy for that very, very reason. Deborah, maybe we can look at this from the angle, because I have to apply it to myself as a parent and thinking, okay, what would I do? What would the action plan be? But I think maybe we need to start with what some of those challenges are, because it's a get real very quickly kind of a scenario, especially if we sit on the more extreme side of the spectrum. So when we are a parent of a child with special needs, how does that journey generally begin?
I think it is exactly that. It's a journey. And it's a journey where one requires a lot of patience and perseverance, but there are great, great joys along the way. And I think it changes the perspective on life for people who experience that. And it's hard to understand it if you're not in that same situation. But kindness from people in the community, teachers that are understanding, can make more difference than you can ever know. So I think it's also important as a parent to use what you have and manage each day, one day at a time.
Completely.
Because there's often a whole family, other siblings, and we can't always do everything at once, but we just do the best we can as parents.
And I love the way you put that, just one day at a time. And I think with every great challenge, it needs to be like that. Don't look at the peak of the mountain. I always say, just the first step. That's manageable. You can do that. You talk about the complexity of families. It's tough enough with two different children, never mind with extreme pressures added to that. But being able to plug into a center that is geared for this, where there is understanding the second you walk into the door. When you talk about this leveler, what difference? Because I often view children, and I've dealt with amazing people that would be labeled as disabled, going to the Special Olympics, doing things that I can't dream of doing physically. Often it's just a case of finding the key to unlock that lock. How does your center focus on that, or are you able to achieve that within this by taking them out of that real world and putting them in this kind of this beautiful water reality?
Wow, Graham. So we try to, the main focus right now is to enrich parents, because parents alone find it challenging. We kind of forget how challenging it is for a parent. I mean, just to put on a bather, getting into the car and coming to the venue is already a challenge. Touching your skin, sensory, motor development, everything is a challenge, because you might, like I said, autism and special needs, it's not a disability, it's just a disorder, and we need to teach kids how to channel the information and make it easier for them. And this is what the swim school is all about, to teach. It's not about just water safety, it's a sense of safety for these kids.
A sense of ownership, I would imagine, and progression and achievement. These really do matter. We are focusing on children with special needs at the moment, a very special focus on Down syndrome today. And I think what I would love is if more parents who are going through this lived experience could weigh in with insights, little gems, those moments. Maybe it's something that a person said to you, a therapist gave you, that one little piece of information that's been a game changer. We've got the experts here today ready to answer questions as well. If you are dealing with a challenge right now, let us know. We want this conversation to continue for the next 3 hours, and luckily the ladies are not going anywhere. Stick around.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back as we continue a very important and enriching conversation for me so far. October is Down Syndrome Awareness Month, and we are continuing our look into supporting children and parents with special needs with speech and language therapist Deborah Stodel and Nabila Deirdricks, co-founder of FINS Aquatics and Fitness Development, an amazing centre, swim school catering for children with special needs such as autism, ADHD, ADD and Down syndrome. And I know it pushes my buttons when I put labels out there, so I would imagine for parents it also pushes their buttons, but you need to know what you're dealing with. So maybe, Deborah, I'll start with you for this one, because I think you can speak to how we can deal with these things in a very practical sense. But when it comes to that part of the equation, what's important for the parents? Are labels okay? How do I engage with a family, with a parent that is going through this journey right now in a way that supports and doesn't make them feel more isolated? What's the best approach?
I think firstly to understand that it's often a process for parents, and they'll be maybe ready for that label at some stage.
As you said, a journey.
Yeah, because the label can be helpful in getting the services we need for a child.
Exactly.
And also to help other people understand and be more tolerant of that child. But labels, in the years that I've worked with people with intellectual disabilities, special needs, there have been so many changes in the wording we use. So, you know, it's sometimes difficult to keep up with what's the right way to use. But I think that labels have a place, but to remember always that, firstly, that child or person is a unique individual and will have their own character no matter what their label is or diagnosis is.
Just as your child, you cannot imagine another child being anything close to like them, because everyone is such a powerful individual in their own right. We need to approach this as that we've got to find a solution that works for that child. It's not one solution applied to all. When you approach a new opportunity to empower a young child or empower a family, what's the first step? How do you approach that practically to give parents the tools?
Wow, there are many approaches, and with that being said, it can be a bit challenging because each individual is different, so the methodology behind it can be tricky.
You only know once the child is there in the water.
Exactly.
And then
You don't know
go.
the personality, you don't know the child, you don't know the character, you don't know the parents. So you need to give peace of mind to the parent as well. Until today, that is always going to be a challenge. And what energy the parent gives off is what the child also feels. And it becomes hard for us as instructors, as teachers, because like I said, FINS Aquatics is not just me, it's a team effort. And
it takes a village, yeah.
It really does, to make it work for that little one, for that child, for that adult, or the umbrella of disorders. And it becomes really quite rewarding at the end of the day. It's the hardest job, but it is so rewarding.
Oh, completely. And I think it brings to bear why we love this job. You're not talking to many people, you're talking to an individual. What does getting it right look like for the families and the parents that every day are facing that challenge of just putting the shoes on? It must be very difficult to see the wood from the trees sometimes, to know when you're getting it right, those successes, and you ultimately want your child to have some semblance of independence for their context and feel like you are giving them a life that they can live themselves. How do we get to that point, or must you just dispel that kind of hope? How should we wrap our kind of expectations up?
I think hope is extremely important, and I think there's still a myth that children only learn in those critical early years, and that's definitely not true. So I see very long-term children. My longest young man has been with me for 24 years.
Wow.
So watching that journey and seeing that there's always hope. But I often say to parents, just start with today and keep your goals in mind. Make them small, attainable goals. And if you think about any child, really, we want to develop their best potential. So keep stimulating them. Even as adults, we learn. We want to make...
Forced to learn every day, yeah.
Make them as independent as possible and use even day-to-day chores to include them, give them a sense of self-worth and connectedness and purpose. And I think those are very important things to focus on. And also knowing that what we do in terms of therapy and input is part of the process, but the unfolding of the child's own development is also very powerful as time goes by.
Everything that you've said to me is exactly the roadmap that I've tried to follow as a parent. So I think there is a universal true north here from a parent's perspective of wanting your child to be empowered, to feel that they're independent. But when you go through the hard yards, one thing I've realized from being able to plug into experts like yourself, it's not about separating yourself, separating your child, taking responsibility off their shoulders because they can't handle it, maybe separating the sibling that you want to protect from this raw emotion. The whole family can get stuck in and take ownership of this space. It's not that traumatizes us. It's the lack of processing. So don't hide from these things. Embrace the communities around you. Speak to a specialist who has had years, 25 years, working with one patient to get to that point, who is now an empowered young man going through that journey. And never forget that your child, regardless of the circumstances, has it within them. It's in them to change their reality. Let them take ownership, even if it's just a little bit of their own journey.